All right, welcome everybody. We should be getting started shortly, and just waiting for Coach Russ, Coach Angel, Coach Logan, or Coach Alex to send me some games that we can look at. And welcome everyone as well to what will hopefully be a fun stream and good interactive, good learning when we're all stuck at home. It's a beautiful day out here in California, and sucks to not be able to spend it outside, but what can you do? Hopefully y'all are having good weather in New York. If we can get confirmation that people can see me and hear me and see the board in the YouTube chat, that'd be great. But in the meantime, I have to wait for my email so that people can send me some games to look at. Hi, ICN Online. Nice to see you. I don't know who you are, which one of the ICN goons is behind that account, but let's see. Okay, so Coach Jonathan has got me some games, and we're underway. Let me download this one and take a look. So options, get PGN. Let me actually, I'll probably stop this share. And go to stop share, and then close this and share the new one. Here, share screen. Okay, so hopefully everybody can see the board now that I have that I've pulled up, and we're going to take a look at this first game. So this one is Kyle LJH167 Ghent against Avan CPS 11. I don't know what CPS stands for, but my high school was abbreviated to CPS once upon a time. Back in 1853, when I went to high school, I went to college preparatory school. So this game starts with E4, C5, and then Knight C3 is honestly a pretty wimpy move. And I would suggest that you play into the open Sicilian, because that's not only is it objectively a better move and something that will put your opponent under more pressure and give you better chances to fight for the advantage, but also you need to play a wide range of different kinds of positions in chess in order to really fully develop your thinking. And sharp positions are often hard to come by. For example, after E4, if black plays E6, it's going to be very hard to get a sharp position. Same with C6. Those are openings where you will get chances to play very strategic chess. But when you're playing against C5, this move Knight C3 is very strategic in its nature, and it's also not that great. But after Knight F3, you have a chance to play into the open Sicilian, which is the most beautifully complex opening in all of chess, and I think you should be going into it, if for no other reason that it will help develop your ability to play sharp and complicated positions in a way that you will not get if you stick with moves like Knight C3. So this ended up, it looks like, in some kind of Grand Prix attack. There followed Knight D4, castle, and here it's been a long time since I brushed up on my theory, but I believe the best move is to take on B5. And if I recall, I came up with some variation, chop D5, chop A6, Knight C3, and B5, and I believe that black is fine. Because if D4, it's very important that after taking and B4, white is not in time to play Knight C6 due to Queen B6 check, and he will lose the knight. And position like this one can get very bad for white very fast. For example, after Knight A4, Queen D5, black is not in time to play or white is not in time to play Knight B6 due to the hanging knight on D4, but once he protects the knight with bishop E3, there follows bishop B7, and again, white is not in time to play Knight B6 due to the threat of mate. And here I remembered this funny line, Rook F2, Rook D8, and here, let's suppose white were to play Knight B6. What should black play in this position? This is a nice idea to know. see if we got people in the chat finding the answer to this one. What should black play here? Anybody want to tell me what the best move is? Sí, soy maestro. Tienes que jugar el mejor move. All right, looks like people are just trickling in, but here I think that black has a very nice pseudo sacrifice available with the move queen takes d4. And the point is that after bishop takes d4 and bishop takes d4, at the moment black only has 2 pieces for a queen, but black is also threatening this knight and this rook and a discovery on white's queen once this bishop moves. So white is going to lose heavy material back. For example, you might say that the exchange is a smaller threat than a full piece, but after knight c4, it's more than just an exchange because now black wins the queen as well and black ends up a piece ahead. And if white tries to save his queen, now we're not going to take the rook, but instead take the knight. At this point, black has 3 very good pieces for the queen, and he can already improve one of them to a rook at a moment's notice, and he will have way too much material, and black is winning. So this is a nice idea. But let's suppose black were to instead make a blunder queen c5. Now white has a very nice move at his disposal. Let's see if anybody can figure out what white should play in this position. It's a very nice tactical shot that people should hopefully can find. Anybody have a brilliant move for white here? Hi, Coach Logan. Thanks for coming. Hi, Angel. Thanks for coming as well. Anybody see a great move that white has that can turn the tide on this game? This is good for tactical vision. To Darren Rice has got it right. So well spotted. The best move is knight e6 when, despite all the hanging pieces in white's position, black is actually lost because his queen is hanging as well as checkmate on the back rank. For example, after the natural move, rook takes d1 check, and rook takes d1, white will win because this threat of mate is extremely difficult to stop. If black takes the knight after bishop c5, white remains in exchange to the good. And if black tries desperadoing the queen, now white would not take the queen back, as now after f takes e6, black will have 2 pieces for a queen. But instead, what should white play here? See if someone can figure it out. Someone have a move for white in this position. Better than taking a free queen. Yes, Darren, well spotted. Instead of taking the queen directly, we first grab this bishop on g7, and now at this point after bishop b6, white's up an entire rook. Of course, he loses a knight back, but he's still an exchange to the good and completely winning after, say, bishop a5 seems like a good place to start. So this would be great, but that's a little bit of a tidbit side note, but still some good tactical training. Instead, black played a6, and here, given that black had decided to move his b pawn in this position to develop this bishop, I think he should have played b5 because it gains a tempo and gains more space. b6 looks a little bit strange. Now, after b6, bishop d5 looks unusual to me. My instinct would be to play e5 to try to shut down this bishop and clear the e4 square for the knight, when this potentially could get very dangerous for black. Instead, after bishop d5, rook b8, d3, e6, bishop b3. At this point here, black, it looks like, took the knight on, took the bishop on b3, excuse me. So just let's see what we have for who thinks the knight on d4 was better than the bishop on b3, and who thinks the knight is worse than the bishop on d3? Because if we have to decide whether we want to make this exchange or not. Is the knight on d4 better or worse than the bishop on b3? Yes, so Coach Logan says the knight looks good. I think he's right. I wouldn't have bothered exchanging this guy. I think black should be proceeding with his normal development. And after something like knight e7, I believe black is absolutely fine here. He is ready to castle next. He's never particularly scared of f5 since he has a lot of guys on that square and can complete his development with a scheme something like castle, d6 to stop e5, potentially bishop b7, and black looks happy enough to me. Knight takes b3 feels a bit impatient. And now b5 also. If black wanted to play b5, he should have done it in one move, not play b6 first and then b5, because this loses time. Now, the bishop pair might be nice for black, but unfortunately for him, there's something more pressing going on, which is that the position is opening up when he's behind in development. And after e5, bishop b7, and knight e4, we're already seeing that it would be really nice, A, if this pawn on c5 weren't hanging, but B, if black wasn't getting immediately mauled by knight d6. And as a result here, he has a very difficult position. If instead of b5, we were to play something like knight e7, and then meet e5 with castle, this position is probably okay for black, because after something like knight e4, well, I might still somewhat prefer white, but I don't think it's the end of the world. Black could, for example, play d5, and he's ready to meet e takes d6 with knight f5, getting his pawn back. And if white plays like knight d6 and black undermines, this knight looks fantastic on d6, but after f6, it's clear this knight won't be secure there. And as a result, black should be able to break out of this position and looks more or less okay. But this is all predicated upon black being able to get himself castled in time. And we quickly find that if he goofs around with b5, as we see, then after e5, bishop b7, and knight e4, black is not going to castle in time. And after black chopped, knight e7 now, well, this is not a very happy bishop, and it will never become a happy bishop, because if black ever plays like f6 to try to break it out, white will be able to take it and then play e5 again. So this bishop on g7 is basically a glorified pawn, and white is able to win the game on the queen side. He played bishop e3, which is absolutely fine, but I also would not take much issue with grabbing this pawn. Also looks very good for white. So, but after bishop e3, queen c8, for the moment, these two pawns are defended, but white can play queen d6 as seen, and really is crashing through. After knight to c6, white took on c5 here, and I have absolutely no problem with that move at all. It certainly should be good enough to win the game, but it almost feels sad to me to let this bishop actually find something active to do. Anyhow, queen c5 wins a clean pawn, and they got this position, but at some point, black will fall apart. Basically, white's extra pawn is doubled, so Well, these doubled pawns may be deficient in their ability to create a passed pawn. They're not deficient at all in their ability to control key squares. For example, this e5 pawn is controlling the f6 and d6 squares, which are very serious weaknesses for black, while the e4 pawn is dominating the e7 knight, who now has nowhere good to go. So these pawns are really doing a number on black's position. After queen c6, rook fd1, black now again cannot castle very easily because of the d7 pawn. So he tried rook d8 just to try to, I guess, prepare to castle, but here I don't like the move queen d6. I don't think white wants to trade his e4 pawn for black's a6 pawn, because when white loses the e4 pawn, that really turns this knight around on e7. So I would think that white's best move would probably be queen e3, and black is very hard pressed to avoid the direct rook d6 ruining his day, as if it wasn't ruined already. In any case, after queen d6, now I think black made the right decision to take on e4. And while he's getting at least his knight has some squares now, it's still very bad because after queen a6, he has a clean pawn down and b5 is hanging as well. Black probably should do something like knight d5 here and try to get some counterplay against white's king side, but I don't think it will work, but it's worth a try. Instead, after queen e2, this is attempting to hang on to the b5 pawn, but it won't work because after rook d2, the queen has to leave anyway. And here after queen e4, queen b5, I'm going to switch this, and queen takes f4. I'm going to switch this to board only and ask people to see if they can figure out what white played here to bring the game to its conclusion. Somebody tell me what white should do. What should white play here to win the game? Looks like Coach Aaron and Coach Logan are getting the right answers. Darren, you have to be careful because that one is not going to work. But yeah, so the best move is going to be rook takes d7 when black is crushed. I mean, he can castle, but he will lose a piece on e7 here. And obviously, this game is no longer worth playing. But if you play this move that Darren had in mind with queen takes d7 check, this is actually a big mistake because after rook d7, rook a8, it might look like mate, but black can sacrifice the knight. And then at this point, his king is free, and now white is losing. Well, maybe not losing, but yeah, probably losing. I mean, he has to try something like this, but he will get his knight stuck here, and black starts taking pawns, and I think that black will win. So this is not what I had in mind, but rook takes d7 is a stronger version because now if black were to play rook takes d7, which I believe happened after rook a8 check, at the end of all this, queen c5 came, and now this is checkmate. Essentially, you can have this position with either a rook on d1, which wasn't that great, but instead you have a queen on b5, and that's a much better move, and this is immediately over. So good game to white. I think apart from playing not very good opening, the rest of the game, I think you played extremely well. And to black, I think you could have done yourself a favor by prioritizing your development a little bit more. I don't think knight takes b3 helped you very much because the knight was better than the bishop, and playing b6 and then b5 was too slow, and you got punished before you could get yourself castled when you should have been playing knight e7 and castling. But okay, good game. So I think we're going to stop the share here. And now I'm going to go to the next game that the coaches have sent me. So this one is another one from Coach Jonathan. And we have, hang on this. Okay, we should skip this because we've already gone over. Actually, no, we can do one more of these ones. So get PGN. Okay, so go back, share screen now. Okay, so hopefully you guys can now see the board. Okay, Logan has one question he wants answered before he has to go. Aside from you, who is the most entertaining video commentator, and why is it Jan Gustafsson? I don't think I'm the most entertaining. I don't think I'm the most entertaining video commentator at all. If you want entertainment, I'm probably not the right guy. I'm pretty boring. If you want to get better at chess, I'm the guy you come to. I'm very good at instructing chess and making you better, but it's in terms of just going and having fun, it depends on your sense of humor and what kind of thing you enjoy. If you enjoy looking at attractive people, then obviously it is Jan Ludwig Hammer. Nobody else can beat him. If you're looking for, I don't know, it depends. I like Gusti. I think he's funny, but my favorite commentator is definitely Svidler. Mainly because I enjoy the chess insights. In any case, let's move on. So we have Kyle JHS against Caleb JHS. So this one started out as a Caro-Kann with bishop d3, knight c6, c3. This opening will always have a place in my heart because it's I actually used this exact opening to beat a Wonder Liang in the last round of the US Championship in 2018, which was, of course, my namesake tournament. So this opening helped get me where I am today. But in that game, a Wonder played knight f6, and here we see queen c7. I guess the point is white would like to, black wants to prevent white from getting his bishop to f4. And it's been a while since I really reviewed the theory here, but after knight e2, bishop g4, knight a3 I think is a move, but I don't love it. If I recall, the best move here is to castle. And after e6, there's this weird move, queen e1, I think is kind of clever because black doesn't really want to walk into knight f4. It's been a while. You'll have to forgive me because I'm old and stupid and I can't remember anything, but I don't want to talk much about the opening. So the game went knight a3, and after a6, the knight didn't have anywhere better to go than c2. But basically here, I think that structurally, black is absolutely fine. Like if black can set up with e6, bishop d6, and knight f6, which it looks like he managed to do pretty quickly, he should have a pretty good position. So white has to be very direct. And indeed, at this point, white went for f3 and bishop f4. But the problem is here, basically, I think if this pawn on f3 were back on f2, I would say white is pleasantly better. Because black has the isolated pawn for not much compensation. But this pawn being on f3 is actually a much bigger problem than it looks like, because it means that white's king is a little bit less secure, and it also means there's going to be random checks on various squares that are kind of annoying. So for example, after castle, bishop d6, specifically because this pawn has moved to f3, like queen b6 and grabbing this pawn could come. Now, I don't believe black can do it here specifically because his queen will likely get trapped, but this is the kind of thing you have to worry about. And it's really, really not a good sign for white if he has to take this knight on e5 and give up the dark squared bishop. But again, it's tough. Like, for example, my instinct here would be to get the king off of this diagonal preemptively. Another nice point is that in the event of knight d3 and bishop d6 here, I'm very happy about avoiding the move queen b6. So for example, if white did a do-nothing move like h3, now after knight takes d3, of course we can't take back, because after bishop f4, black will be a piece up. But after h3, knight d3, bishop d6, if black were to take back here, then after queen d3, white should be better, thanks to the isolated queen pawn and the potentially better knight versus bad bishop. But black will include this check. And then no matter what white does, there is going to be knight takes b2 with a gain of tempo. And then we'll take this back on d6. And after something like this, now black's a pawn up, and this should be good for him. So I quite like getting the king out of dodge in advance, so that after knight takes d3, bishop takes d6, there's no check on b6. And here I think white is better at this point. But black, of course, should not necessarily take that bishop. I think he really doesn't. I mean, black does not want his dark squared bishop to be exchanged. That's his best piece. And here, I don't know, maybe white can still fight for an advantage, but I'm not thrilled with his position. Instead, though, white took on e5, which I think was a serious cardinal sin of all these positions, which is you do not let black get this unopposed dark squared bishop. And after bishop takes e5 here, it seems like white just blundered the h2 pawn, which is not a good sign. But it's not also, it's a tough position to play though, because if you play something like h3, you have to worry about queen b6 check and queen takes b2 as well. So already here, I think black is doing quite well. Following knight cd4, black grabbed the pawn and got away with it. And after castles, black has an extra pawn in the bishop pair, so already the position looks really horrible for white. And all black needs to do to bring the game to its conclusion is activate his pieces and eventually get his queen to h4. So h6 I don't think is the right move here. I would prefer g6 because it really blunts this diagonal. And it's a good general rule of thumb that you want to put your pawns on the opposite color of your opponent's bishop, or sorry, the same color as your opponent's bishop. And this restricts them pretty nicely. Well, after h6, this h5 square was vulnerable, this f5 square was vulnerable, but still, I mean, the way black played here, like, at this point, white seems like he should get mated. After rook d5, queen h4, this bishop comes back, but again, like, if we compare the quality of these bishops, it's so obvious black's bishop is going to mate white, and, I mean, you can even play bishop f4 and then follow up with queen g3, and it looks like that's approximately what happened. So rook e8, rook d4, bishop f4, and now it seems like white blundered this mate threat of queen e1. But even if you actually see the mate threat and you want to stop it, it's not easy to do. Like, what move exactly do you want white to play? Maybe you can play this move, but there follows queen g3, and black is quickly invading. After something like king g1, somebody tell me a good move for black here. What should black play at this point? Not too hard, but, you know, how do we continue the attack? Yeah, wait just a couple more seconds, see if anyone can suggest a good move for me. Excuse me. All right, so this is tough because it's not like we can just cross straight through. But I think that queen h2 check should do the job because after king f1, black can play bishop g3, cutting off white's king from escaping, so that white cannot play rook e8 on pain of queen h1 mate. So in order for white's king to escape, he will have to play this, and then my thought was here, black could potentially even switch to the d file when all of a sudden queen h1 followed by queen e1 is not messing around, and well, we might not mate immediately, but in the long run, I don't think white's king will survive. It seems like this attack should be decisive. For example, after rook d4, which I think is the only move, let's say check, and even like rook takes d4 followed by rook d8. I mean, white's position is absolutely miserable. I mean, maybe we can't mate him like right now, but it's pretty bad. Even something like this, just come to f2 next, and not going to do it for white. In any case, this would have been good, but it looks like white blundered the game with rook e4, and then after queen e1, a very nice checkmate with it's a queen sacrifice, not particularly difficult, but very nice nonetheless. So good game to Caleb LJHS, and I will go ahead and move on to the next one. So let's see. So these were games from Coach Jonathan. Is this here? Okay, get PGN. Okay, so we have another game here. Oh, and this one looks like we're going to have some fun. We've got an open Sicilian. So this was Avon CPS 11 versus Chenren ZPS 59. So let's see what happens. It starts with E4, C5, and unlike the first guy, White went for it and played the open Sicilian. Good on you. I applaud your decision. And it looks like they ended up in a rouser here. And White played F3, which is, the main move is Bishop G5, but F3 is a very reasonable alternative and one that I played against Emilio Cordova, right? And I won a nice game against him. But after F3, E5, Knight B3, Bishop E7, Bishop E3, Castle, Queen D2, we have what looks like a pretty normal Sicilian where both sides are going to try to launch an attack. But in general, in positions like this one, I think White's attack usually tends to be stronger if Black doesn't get something pretty direct, and this position's no exception. So here, while the move Queen C7 looks very natural, it just seems like a simple thing to help your position. I actually think that it's basically a waste of time because Black needs to get his pawns in motion. And I believe he should instead have played A5, which threatens A4 and is actually a little bit annoying for White to deal with because he can play Bishop B5, but then the bishop gets challenged by Knight A7, and it's not so easy to find a square. For example, if Bishop A4, what should Black play here? What is Black's best move? If you bought my DVDs, you should be able to figure this out. Darren Rice, Rook B8 will hang the knight on A7, so let's not do that. Again, guys, I'm sorry that there's a little bit of a delay. You probably hear me talk and see my screen like 20 seconds after I say it, so there's a little bit of a delay in our communication. But yes, Sophia oh my God, this is going to be horrible. Prezhemeslianer has suggested B5, and this is the best move. So well spotted. The point is something that I talk a lot about in my DVD series, the Shankland method, which I will shamelessly plug. I think you should all buy. But the point is basically what Black really wants to do is set his queenside pawns in motion and launch an attack. And the reason, and so he wants to play B5, but he can't because the pawn is going to hang. And basically but he wants to. And basically whenever you have a clear positional idea that you want to accomplish, in this case, sending your queenside pawns in motion to launch an attack, and your opponent is stopping you from doing so, the first question you should always ask yourself is what happens if I do it anyway? And we quickly find that after B5, Black's compensation is through the roof. For example, after knight takes B5, knight takes B5, bishop takes B5, and A4, White's knight is forced all the way back into the corner on A1. Black can, if he really cares, Black can probably go take that pawn on A2, although I don't think it's necessary. I would rather play Queen B8 and set the pieces in motion. And I mean, Black's next moves are going to be like Rook C8 and D5, and I think White is going to completely fall apart. So in this position, that's not so easy. And if White plays A4 himself, this weakens the B4 square considerably. And now again, Black can fight for D5. For example, after G4, D5, G5, I think Black can probably go knight takes E4, and G4 here is seems okay for him with complications. But basically the way it went instead was black played queen c7. And this, I think, is a waste of time because it doesn't help the pawns get going. And white now is immediately direct with h4. And after rook d8, it's very clear that black would like to play g5, but they're not going to be able to because g5 is too fast. And if white gets g5 before black can play d5 and forces the knight backwards, then black's position doesn't make much sense, and things will get very ugly. So here, after g5, indeed, I think black's position is pretty horrendous. Knight h5 is probably the best thing you can do, but this position is very bad for black already. And after knight d5, here, if black were to take it, we see that this knight is misplaced. It has nowhere to go. It probably has to go back home like this. And now, well, what is white's best plan for the next couple moves? What's the next two things they should do? Oh, okay, sorry, Daniel. I didn't realize I was using the wrong one. Okay. Do I have the U.S. Women's Champion commenting in my? No, that's Jennifer Yue. Oh, it's not even Jennifer Yue. Okay, all right. So what should black play here, or what should white play here? Excuse me. I don't know, Angel. People show up in my classes. Trust me, I've had people much stronger than that show up in my classes too. So, what should white play in the next couple moves? What is the plan? It looks like the attack has been stalled, but there's a big problem with black's position that white can exploit with a very direct continuation. One of black's pieces is in grave danger and can be attacked. See if I can come up with this. Okay, so a few people are looking at bishop a7, but I don't like this move because after b6, you're going to have to trade your bishop for the knight. And that was a really, really good bishop. And the big problem that I think black's biggest problem in the position by far was this knight. And now that this bishop on the dark squared bishop has to get exchanged, and we will do something like this, all of a sudden black's knight is free to come to f4. And then the g5 pawn becomes a weakness and black's pieces spring to life. And okay, white is a pawn up, and maybe that will count someday, but I think white has a much better option here. So Julian Liu has said queen d3 and then get bishop h3 and f5. No, it's not quite what I have in mind. Here's your hint. The knight on h5 is very vulnerable. It has nowhere to go. Can we take advantage of that in some way? I'll take it just for one more minute, see if people can figure out what to do here. All right. we're running short on time and I have other games I want to look at, so we're going to go over this. But I believe the best move is bishop h3, which really does it all. It pressures the c8 square so black can't use an open file, but more importantly, white is about to play bishop g4 and go trap that knight, which should basically win the game on the spot. I don't think there's really anything black can do here. So in any case, though, in the game, black tried queen d7, which was an understandable decision. But here, at this point, I don't like the move that white chose. White played h4. And I think this is a mistake because, as I mentioned, black's biggest problem in this position is this h5 knight. And as soon as you play h4, the knight is allowed to exchange for the bishop. And that is not something I think white wanted to allow. So white has a number of things they could try here. I'm just trying to think of what I would want most. But even a simple move like king b1 probably is a pretty good start. Also, white could, let's just be direct, bishop c4 looks like this is probably best. And now white is able to play h4 next if he so desires, because knight g3 will not actually do anything, and black's position is strategically really dubious, and white looks much better to me. But I don't like h4, because here, as mentioned, knight g3 could come. Instead, black played f6 and lost the chance after white took and went bishop c4. Now black tried knight g3, but there was no more bishop to take, which means that the position will get very bad. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe white has a tactic, not quite, but let's see what white played. Knight f6, yeah. So it looks like white went in for a tactical resource here, but I'm wondering if that was necessary, at least right now. The move that appeals to me is rook h3 to attack this knight and force it back. The point being, of course, that if black were to take this rook, there will follow knight takes f6 check, and with the double check, the queen is lost. It looks like white went for this tactical idea, but this knight on d5 is so good, I really don't want to exchange it. There's lots of things white could try. Like, I also very much like the move rook g1, which puts this rook on a nice open file. And my point is, in the event of bishop takes h4, I think white has a very strong tactical resource here that looks like it wins the game on the spot, unless I'm missing something. So let's see if anybody can figure out what white should play here to win the game. What is dabbing? I'm so old. I don't know any of this young people lingo. Hi, Jude Kazan. Find a winning move. So Angel has suggested queen h2, which is probably good enough. And yeah, this looks winning. That's not what I had in mind, but this also seems to do the trick. I was thinking white could play bishop g5, with the point that after bishop g5, queen g5, the knight on g3 is trapped, and white will win it and the game. So here the point now is, after rook g1, black will have to retreat with knight h5, and now, yes, white has a winning tactic here. Let's see if anybody can figure out how white should proceed to win the game on the spot. Look for forcing moves here. There's a very nice tactical resource. So a couple of people are recommending bishop h6, but I don't actually think that threatens anything, and black can play king h8 in response. Try to calculate a full variation. You have to see like 4 moves ahead and then black will resign. See if you can find those 4 moves. All right, so Angel has said knight takes f6 and knight c5. That's probably fine. I thought the other move order was better, but I don't think it will matter. So yeah, something, basically if we go knight c5, you could take f6 first instead as well. But basically here the queen and the bishop are forked, so black really has to take this knight, but the problem is now after knight takes f6 check, black is going to lose the queen in an unpleasant way. So no matter how he takes back, if knight f6, there follows queen d7. And after something like rook d7, bishop e6 check, white is equalized material for the moment, but he's also about to pick up a gross amount as the king and the rook are forked. Similarly, if black takes with the rook on f6, this doesn't save him either, because after queen takes d7, rook takes d7 and bishop takes e6 check, white is going to end up with a very solid extra exchange and very good rooks at that, invading the position, and black is absolutely done for. So this would have been a winning tactic, but instead white took knight f6, rook f6, and basically what's happened here is white is traded badly because this knight on d5 was really good. But I believe rook e6 from black here was a blunder, and black should have played queen e6 instead, which is better both on general grounds because this rook on f6 is extremely well placed, and it doesn't want to go to a passive square like e6, and it's also like hitting this pawn. And here, in fact, black actually might be winning material on the spot, as I don't see how white will save both his rook on h1 and the pawn on f3. But in addition, there's tactical reasons because after rook e6, rook g1, now black is going to be forced into the same knight c5 tactic we saw a second ago. And indeed here, this happened. So unless there was something else notable that happened this game, and I doubt there will be, yeah, it looks like white cruised straight through. So I'm going to, oh no, did white cruise straight through? No, he hung something. Okay, but I want to move on to another game because we want to get as many games as possible. And I think I've only done games from Coach Jonathan so far, and I'd like to move on. So we've seen some interesting moments in that one, and I'm going to now move on to another game that we have from let's see. Here we go. I have to download that. Let's go with this one. Okay, so we have here Simone MPS33 and Chloe G Chapin GANDT. So hopefully this game is interesting. It started out with Queen's Gambit, e3, c5, b3, knight c6. So already here, I think black has sort of won the opening battle because they've been able to fight back in the center and white isn't putting that much pressure. And things so far are going fine. But around here, it looks like, up to here, it's been pretty normal. But at this point now, well, it's still pretty boring, but there's still a lot of game left. If I were black, I'd be very tempted to take on d4 and try to resolve this tension, because if white takes back e takes d4, this bishop becomes really bad. But if white takes back with knight takes d4 instead, then black gets more central control. And after something like bishop e2 and potentially e5, I think that black's central control could be pretty nice. But instead, black was happy to maintain the tension. I take no issue with that. But after a3, now, this is a moment where I do think black definitely should have taken on d4. And the reason that I think so is that it will force white to end up taking back with the pawn on d4 and leaving themselves with the bad bishop on b2. The point is that because this pawn on a3 is going to be hanging, white's going to really struggle to make knight takes d4 work. For example, here after bishop e2, queen e2, and knight takes d4, now white cannot take with the bishop because after bishop a3, they lose material. So instead, white will have to play e takes d4, and this is a very bad sign for this bishop. And black has a very nice position because black's bishop is better, this pawn is backwards, and black can, for example, start playing rook c6 and go queen c7, rook c8, put a huge amount of pressure on this c-pawn and on the open file, and I think that black should be very pleasantly better. Perhaps it's in white's best interest to instead take with the knight on e2, but at this point, white's pieces are going backwards, and well, it's probably not that terrible for white, but I think black is probably a little bit better. For example, say queen e7, developing with a gain of tempo on this weak a3 pawn. It looks like black should be a little better here. So instead, though, black played a6, rook e1, and so both sides are being very patient here. And I think that they could have been a little bit more direct, especially black, I think, should be taking on d4 pretty soon. Let's see what we have in the chat. Nothing much yet. So here after queen e7, at this point now, white should notice that there is an x-ray threat to the pawn on a3, and I think that white should take on c5 as a result. And after something like bishop c5, it might look like white has lost some central control, but after c4, excuse me, b4 first, and say, I don't know, bishop a7 or d6, and then c4 to follow, I think white is still pushing back in the center pretty hard and should be at least fine here. But instead, after c4, now there's a problem that this pawn on a3 is hanging, which black expertly exploited. So it went c takes d4, e takes d4, bishop a3. It went like this, queen back to e7, knight e5, and now I'm confused because it looks like the game score ends here. So perhaps this wasn't the best game to choose, but to be fair, I hadn't seen the game before I chose it. But yeah, it looks like here, I don't know why the game score ended, but I mean, the position looks really horrible for white. They're already a pawn down and with some serious structural weaknesses. For example, after bishop e2, if white doesn't want to lose a second pawn on d4, they will have to take on c6, accelerating black's development. And after something like this, and say dc and rook d8, or maybe queen d7 to avoid d5, or even queen c7, just something like this, black goes rook d8 next. Black is a clean pawn up and has good pressure against the hanging pawns in the center, and this should be very, very bad for white. So a good game from black. I think you could have been a little bit more direct by taking d4 faster and avoiding d takes c5. But when you saw your chance to grab a pawn, you went ahead and took it, and that's good. You one of the biggest parts of winning games is taking the chances that are given to you, and you did a very good job here. So we don't really have so much time left, and I was told we should have lots of time, that I should always make a little bit of time in the end for question and answer, and I don't think we have I don't think we have time for another game. So at this point, I'd just like to open it up for general question and answer that you can feel free to type into the chat. And I will answer it to the best of my ability. So I'm going to kill the share here. But we still managed to go over 4 games, which was good. All right, so questions, what do we got? Angel said, if there's one player in the world right now that you can challenge to a match, who would it be and why? Well, if you ask a stupid question, you get a stupid answer. Obviously, the answer is Magnus. He's clearly by far the best player in the world. I think it's hard to argue that he isn't the best player of all time. I mean, any self-respecting chess player would, you've got to say Magnus. Best advice to get over 700. Play, study, challenge yourself to the best you can. Play with people who are better than you. Don't be afraid to lose. Try to learn from the mistakes you make and go from there. How do you clear your head when you make a mistake? This is tough, but I think the best thing you can do is just always try to solve the position in front of you and ignore everything else. It doesn't matter what it was. It doesn't matter what the position was before. You need to consider the position as it stands. And one of the most common mistakes that people make is if they have a fantastic position, for example, and then it becomes equal, and because you messed up, you make a big mistake, you blunder, and the position is now equal. The worst thing you can do is think, oh, I was winning, therefore I have to win this game. No, you should be an adult, accept, okay, the position is equal now, let's continue as though the position is equal. If it's a draw, that's fine. And if I get a chance to outplay my opponent, I will take it. But you don't want to start immediately going on tilt and taking massive risks and stuff like that. Okay, other questions? Hi, Coach Alex. What do I think about the candidates? Well, it was an interesting first half. I mean, who knows what will happen? I don't know if it will be restarted or if it will resume from the current position or what will happen later. But well, I think clearly, I think Nepomniachtchi was on the best form overall, but he's erratic, as we saw. I mean, he played absolutely fantastic, and then throughout the first half up to the last round, and then this game with Maxime was really horrendous. So if he can keep up his normal form and play the kind of chess he's capable of, especially given that he's currently tied for first, I would expect him to win the candidates. But he can really, but this is the kind of thing that can happen. He can play really good chess, like really well throughout a whole tournament, and then just randomly play an outrageously bad game. And I was actually saw that firsthand. Like I played him in Weikanze in 2019, and he had been playing a really good first half of the event. He was on like +3 or +4 when I played him. He was doing really well, and I just absolutely mauled him in the penultimate round. It was a shockingly easy game, and he was one of the highest guys I'd ever beaten, and he had been on such good form. So it really depends if he can keep himself together, but we'll see. Have I ever beat Magnus? Not in a serious game. We've only played one classical game, and that was a draw. Other questions? Other questions? Am I looking forward to it in the future? If I can beat Magnus someday, that would be fantastic. That would be great. So Angel, I mean, that question, what do I think having our extra Russian in the field? In general, look, borders and countries are the way the world works. And I like the idea that if you host a tournament, you get to put in one of your own players that may not necessarily be as good as the rest of the field, just sort of as affirmative action as a way to get your own guys better. For example, if you look at Weikanze, where Jordan Van Foreest has played both of the last two editions, and honestly, he's not strong enough to merit that kind of invitation in general. But because he's Dutch, he gets invited, and I think that's absolutely fantastic. Because the Dutch are trying to give an opportunity to their own best young player. And he, for example, this year he played absolutely fantastic chess too. While he was there, he made a huge score, and this was an opportunity that I think was really wonderful for him. So, you know, countries giving nods to their own players when they're hosting tournaments, and in an ideal world, it wouldn't have to happen, but I don't really mind it so much. Although I will say it's a little annoying that some countries do that more than others, let's say. What are some good intermediate openings and defenses? I would say play the Semislav, because I just came out with an opening course on it that I'm very proud of, and you can buy it on Chessable. But no, but seriously, with Black, I think you should try to play dynamic chess. I think openings like the Semislav, the Grunfeld, for example, or maybe even the King's Indian are good choices for young players looking to get better and train their sense of dynamics, because the most important part of chess. The Sicilian is a very good place to start, playing the Najdorf, things like that. As white, I don't know, you can play e4 or d4, but play it pretty aggressively, I would say. All right, so it's time for one more question. I'll take one more before we call it a day. Last question. All right. Okay, I'll take two more. What do you think of the classical Sicilian? The classical Sicilian its reputation is not very good. I think it's much better than its reputation. I do think white is better, but it's thought that like, oh, it gives a big advantage to white, but that's not true at all. I think white has to be extremely well prepared to get anywhere. I think it's a very underrated opening, but still maybe not one of the absolute best. And finally, to Angel, who is the greatest. I was the biggest Kasparov fanboy you could possibly imagine, but I think even now at this point, you cannot argue that it's not Magnus. I mean, he has dominated the world for so many years, had the highest rating of all time over and over and over again. Throughout most of his career, his normal rating is higher than Gary's peak rating. He's dominated all the time controls. I mean, fended off all stronger challengers. I mean, I don't think you can argue that it's not Magnus at this point. He hasn't lost a world championship match yet. I mean, it's anyhow. Yeah. Okay. I'll leave it at that, but I'm looking forward to seeing all of you for next week. And I would appreciate it just in general if I could get the games a little bit earlier, just, if I can get them 15 minutes before instead of 2, it makes it easier to get started. But yeah, thanks all for joining, and I'll see you next week.